Welcome to the Spiritual Principles Made Practical podcast. Today, we're very fortunate to have Jerry Stalnecker with us. He's a Marine Corps veteran and is doing a yeoman's job in supporting other veterans and their families and stuff. So, welcome. It's great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, what you're up to, and why you're up to it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there, but I'll give you the summary, the 30,000 foot. But first of all, I appreciate you having me on and talking about these things. I am the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of an organization called the Mighty Oaks Foundation, where we serve veterans, service members, and first responders, and a number of ways that we do that. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but all of that from a faith perspective. So understanding that trauma and brokenness and hurt happens, and there are a lot of ways that it can happen, but that the answer is recognizing who God created us to be and walking that out in our lives in spite of what's happened in our past. And so have the opportunity to do that. That's kind of my focus every day. But I was raised in a pastor's home. I was raised by church planters. My dad and mom started a church here in Southern California. And man, as much as I respected them then and still do, I knew that that was not God's calling on my life. That looked like a lot of hard work, and I didn't think that was the right thing for me. So I decided when I was a teenager that it would be easier to go into the Marine Corps than to start a church. So for all the church
Wow.
planners out there, I've got a lot of respect for you. And a number of things happened, but I did end up in the Marine Corps. I was commissioned eventually as an infantry officer, served with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, based out of Camp Pendleton here in Southern California, and did a number of things. Deployed finally. My last deployment was to Iraq in 2003 as part of the initial push into Iraq. And then got out, and God is funny. So the thing I said I would never do, I ended up in ministry and worked at a church. Had some struggles coming out of that and transitioning out of that, but God used it and ended up pastoring for a period of time, and then getting involved in the work that we do with Mighty Oaks. So it's been an interesting journey. In addition to that, I have 4 kids, two adults, one graduating high school, one with a year of high school left, and a wonderful wife. We've been married 28 years.
Congratulations.
And we have one granddaughter together. So we're excited about
Awesome.
that. So yeah, that's me. That's the 30,000 foot. That's the quick version.
Well, that sounds like a great life, and I'm sure that there's been, challenges and stuff for you along the way, right? So it's I'm curious about how, what really works in helping people. I mean, wasn't in the military, so I didn't have that experience, but trauma's trauma, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I heard you when you say you also work with first responders, so it's not only military.
Right. Yeah. Well, so, if you just look at the data around trauma, I think we're told that something like 70% of Americans, just Americans generally, will experience a clinically diagnosable traumatic event at some point in their lives. And, why 70%? I would say it's 100%. We all deal with things. Um, and there are clinical ways to address that, and there's all of the medical definitions of these things. Someone defined trauma to me at one point. I love the definition. Trauma is an event or series of events that pushes one beyond their ability to cope. So we could talk about the clinical and the medical, but fundamentally, what is trauma? It's an event or series of events that pushes one beyond their ability to cope. And I think all of us can relate to times in our lives where things have happened, situations have come into our lives that really stop us, and we have a hard time moving forward. And that's, to a degree, what we address through Mighty Oaks and we address through faith and really a Christian biblical worldview is understanding that life, unfortunately, because of sin and brokenness and hurt, will involve trauma. It will involve brokenness. It will involve these things in our lives. And we don't want to diminish that. But we also don't just get over it or forget about it or get past it. That's what people try to do, just push it down and just move on. Um, But a lot of people will find their identity in their trauma. They'll find their identity in what has hurt them, the things that they've experienced. And that's not God's plan for us either. And so it's recognizing that God has a plan for us. He has created us for something. And if that's the case, then regardless what's happened in our lives, we can move forward. And so it's understanding, and this is how we address these issues, even with those who've served in the military or in the first responder community. Trauma happens, but you need to find your identity not in that trauma, not even in the uniform or the service that you were a part of, but find your identity in what God has created you to be, to do, to accomplish. And once you have that purpose, you're able to walk that out in your life. And man, there's a lot of work that has to be done on the other side of that recognition or that understanding and help and hope and all those things. But just fundamentally, it's acknowledging things happen. Some of them are very, very difficult, but I can move forward when I recognize that God has a plan for me.
Yeah, the sometimes, I mean, at least in my experience, it's not always obvious as to what linking up the trauma and the difficulties in that the trauma has created. You know, I mean, it's not necessarily a straight, easy, visible line to
Yeah.
connect those two, right?
Yeah, well, and that's exactly right. And part of, it depends on how people respond to trauma and what that trauma is. But so often our behaviors are formed, our thought patterns, which lead to these behaviors, are formed by what's happened to us. And because there's been hurt, and because there's been brokenness, because others have said or done things to us, we start to view the world through that lens of trauma, and we don't always understand it or even know it. It's amazing through our programs, people will come to us and they'll say, I'm dealing with trauma because of what happened to me in the military, because I was in combat, whatever the case. And so I'm dealing with trauma. So um, my relationships have always been a problem. My, relationship, even with substances and those things, have always been a problem. And so they start to identify, I'm struggling with these things because of what happened to me in the military. Well, the longer we talk and the more time we spend with them and help them unpack that, we start to recognize what you're dealing with really started when you were a child and someone did something to you or you experienced this, but it was normative in your life, so you didn't recognize it as impacting the rest of your life. But now you've tried to compensate for these feelings that happened in childhood through military service or time in the first responder world. And so you haven't even recognized where a lot of these behaviors and thought patterns came from. And then it's not the trauma that's caused your issues with substance abuse or even in your other relationships. It's the decisions you've made on the other side of that. So yes, to your point, it's messy to unpack a lot of this, and you try to put your finger on the one thing that caused it, and it's often not, most of the time, it's not one thing. It's a series of decisions on the other side of trauma and hurt and brokenness that lead you to a place, at least with us, where you look around and think, I need help and I don't know where to go and I don't even know how I got here.
Yeah, I know in my case, I it took me a long time to discover that that I didn't feel it was safe to be me.
Mm,
And but it took me a long time and some of the things I had to kind of muscle through,
yeah.
when I didn't understand that. I mean, I remember being my first sales call. I had a sales job coming out of college, and I was so nervous going into that first sales call that my shirt was soaked with perspiration.
Yeah.
And I couldn't open the door to the car. I couldn't get myself to do that. And until I had the thought, I said, "You're only 20," and I had this thought, "You're only 21 years old. No one expects you to know everything." And that thought enabled me to at least open the door and go out on the
Mm,
and and then I remember 5 years later I was going into a sales call, And I thought to myself, well, I've got to write notes about what I need to cover and we'll just deal with it. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, just muscling, just repetitive muscling through it for 5 years took me from once, a shirt soaked with
Yep.
perspiration to a pretty high level of confidence.
Yeah.
But I couldn't at that point in my life identify, very much of not the cause and not the healing. I mean, I just kind of muscled through it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, one of the principles when I'm talking about resiliency is exactly that. It's you have to make a decision when you are confronted by or you encounter these obstacles, these difficulties, these challenges, these traumas. You have to make a decision at that moment. And so, what you just described, sitting in the car, you have to make a decision. Am I going to give up? Am I going to stay where I am and die? That's the language that I would use around that. Am I just going to quit? Or am I going to take the next step? And so much of moving forward on the other side of trauma and insecurities and all of these things, it's not about having the whole thing figured out. It's not about knowing where you're going to end up necessarily. It's just taking the next step. Don't give up, don't quit, and take the next step. I have a friend who says you need to take the next courageous step, right? Whatever the next hard thing is, do that. And then do it again, and then do it again. Using your story, it's opening the door. That's step one. It's getting out of the car. That's step two. It's walking up to the building. That's step three. It's opening the door. That's step four, right? And it's just one step after another. And I think one of the things that causes so much paralysis for us when we're dealing with difficult things or even trying to, work through trauma and those issues is we can't see the end from here. And so we think, well, if I don't have it all figured out, I don't know what to do. No, you know what you need to do. Take the next step and then take the one after that and continue. And there's so much power in that. I make the statement sometimes that persistence is almost a superpower in this world because so few people are persistent. It's not the smartest people in the world or the most talented people in the world that succeed. It's those who just keep moving forward. And that's powerful. And God uses that. And we pursue him one step at a time. The Bible gives multiple examples of this. It's explicitly called out that it's a lamp, it's a light. It shows us the next step, but not the whole path. And we need to continue to pursue God. And it is amazing. We look back over years of doing that and think, how did we get here? Well, it was one step at a time. And that's really important.
Yeah, I've had, I'm sure you have, and I'd be curious, to the extent you'd like or to is to tell us some of your story and some of I mean, I've always, in the coaching that I do, oftentimes I use myself as an example in the stories of my life, some
Yeah.
as inspired, that are helpful. And what are some of your stories that you've relayed to people, if any, that have been really helpful for you and them both?
Yeah. So I have some, military stories, but my personal story is coming home from Iraq. I left the Marine Corps, and I mentioned that the thing I had said I wouldn't do is go into ministry, and then God worked in my life and in my family and pointed toward ministry, and so left the Marine Corps. I was leading Marines in combat. That's the thing I had always wanted to do. We were in Iraq as part of the push, and so all the things that happened along with that, for those that remember 2003, right? Um, and I came home, and 30 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps and I was working at a church. I haven't, been to Bible college. I don't have a seminary education. My pastor at the time hired me to lead projects and to do other things at the church, right? And so I found myself having done the thing I always wanted to do, now being in a completely different environment and an environment where I was trying to just figure out what I was supposed to do. And more than anything, like, who am I? If I'm not that guy that was, in Iraq in the Marine Corps, if I'm not that guy, then who am I? And for those that have served in the church world, it's a very different world and it's not always easy. And you work with volunteers, that's a challenge. And just all of it was very different. And I struggled through that. Um, and I made some bad decisions just in how I treated people and, how I treated my family. And it took some time and it took some people stepping into my life to confront me and to help me get back on track. But really the process of that was a one day and one step at a time. I didn't have all of the answers. I didn't know most of the questions to be answered. But one day at a time, I could find the answers and I could talk to the right people and I could reach out to those who could help me and I could plug into organizations, which eventually is how I ended up doing the work that we're doing now. And it took a long time. It took years, and that's the process. It's a growth process. It's not a question necessarily of how you got here, right? This is where a lot of people struggle is like, how did I get here? Well, that's important, but the most important thing you can ask is, what do I do now?
Right.
This is where I am. What do I do now? And it took me a long time to get to that place, but once I did, I was able to start walking that out. And, today, still trying to walk that out. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but man, some people lose hope in the middle of that.
no, I relate to that. I mean, um, I've tried and failed more times than I can
Sure. Yeah. All of us have. Yeah. All of us have.
At one time, I was inspired. I was involved with the IRS had a problem with me, and I
Mhm.
meditated on it, and I got, fight this to the death, and I've never gotten that before in my life, and so I didn't know what to do, and so I'd pray and meditate. Excuse me, and I'd get an idea, and I'd try it, and that wouldn't work. And at one point, I thought of changing my middle name to Roadkill because after every attempt, I felt like an 18-wheeler had just run over
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And eventually, I got my senator and congressman involved, and got the IRS to follow the law. And after that, everything was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That can be a
But
process though.
it was a real process. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to tell the stories of perseverance because I think that they give people hope and courage. I had a friend. I mean, another time in my life where I made a goal to make it through the next 3 minutes
Mm.
because that was sort of the level of pressure I was under at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And later, years later, and I told him the story and stuff. And then years later, he said, "Oh, I was in this really bad situation, and I thought about your story, and it helped me."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I tell the story and I wrote a book called March or Die. And the principle there is you have to make a decision, as we talked about. Are you going to stay where you are and die, or are you going to march? And the story that came from was it was a firefight that we were involved in Iraq. Ended up on a bridge, and things were going from bad to worse. And I moved, my unit to a place that I thought would be better for us. It was worse for us, and things were out of control. And it's kind of analogous to life. You make these decisions, as you just mentioned. You try these things, and sometimes you move from bad to worse and in those moments when the world around you seems to be just absolutely imploding, you have to answer that question. Am I going to stay here and die, or am I going to take the next step and get out of this kill zone? Um, and that's what it is. It's the next 3 minutes. Sometimes it's the next 60 seconds. I can't figure this whole thing out, and I'm not even going to try. But what can I do in the next minute? What can I do in the next hour? What can I do to take the next step? And it's doing that over and over again, that perseverance that gets us to a place where we can think clearly and see clearly and address the very real enemy so often that's in front of us. But it's exactly what you just mentioned. It's, what are you gonna do for the next couple minutes? Let's just focus on that, and then we'll deal with the next one after that.
yeah. I mean, I guess there's certain advantages in being older, and one of them is you have more experiences.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So at my age, I've got a bunch of
All that wisdom you've earned.
but one of the things is that in that situation that I was telling you about earlier is that I had turned away from God and the light maybe 5 or 6 years earlier by telling myself that I wasn't up to the challenge. And
Mm,
I swore I would never do that again. So here I was in this really stressful situation. I'd run out of money and I was about to be out on the street and stuff. And I said, God, do you want me on the street? And I go, here, no. And I said,
yeah.
well, I don't know how that's not going to happen. And he said, well, just hang in there. And so I did my 3 minutes and I hung in there and I hung
Yeah.
in there. And he said, and then I heard, that in my mind, the voice that said, uh, go see your parents. And I was in my 40s at the time.
Mm,
And I said, well, nothing, this doesn't have to do with them, you know. I'm an adult, I mean,
yeah.
it's not their problem. It's my problem.
Mm,
And I heard, what, it would be turning away from me and turning your back on me not to go.
mm,
Well, okay, well, I swore I wouldn't do that. So I said, but I don't know what to do when I get there. And I heard, don't worry about that. Your job is
mm,
to get you there, and I'll take care of the rest. So I show up and I am at somewhat a loss for words to describe this, but this energy, I'll just say, came over me. And it was like my awareness was outside of me, and I was watching me and listening to the words coming out of my mouth. And just this amazing energy came through me, and
mm,
it healed. I didn't even, I had no plan for what was going to happen, and it healed my relationship with my parents. It
wow.
got me out of debt and gave me working capital. But more importantly, it was an experience now that I can fall back on when things look rough
Mm,
and say, as long as I don't turn away from God and the light,
right.
that um, there'll be a solution,
Mm,
and it may not be now, but it'll be, but it will be,
yeah.
and so that in many ways horrendous experience has turned out to be a source of real strength for me
Mm, yeah.
because I feel like, okay, you know what? Should I get myself in a horrible bind again? I know what to do.
Yeah. 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 That's good. I like the passage in Hebrews chapter 12. It's verses 1, 2, and 3, but it talks about running the race set before us as we pursue Jesus. And I like it for a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of truth there. It talks about the cloud of witnesses. It talks about laying aside the things that are holding us back. It talks about running the race set before us. But what it doesn't do is give us a destination. It just tells us you need to keep running as you follow Jesus. And I think that's the principle, right? And that's what you just kind of outlined is it's just listening for the voice of God and letting God guide us and direct us and finding peace and contentment and joy in that. So many people have so much anxiety over where I'm going to end up and how this is all going to work out and the rest of it, when really what God calls us to is following Him. And we need to be more concerned with whether or not we're following God than with where we're going to end up in, whatever period of time, right? As we look down the road and just trust Him and have faith in Him. And throughout Scripture, again and again, the call to follow God. You go all the way back to Genesis and Abraham. God told Abraham, "Hey, go to a place that I'll show you. Get up and move, and then I'll show you. I'll tell you when you're there." It was about following God, and example after example after example, and that's what it is. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Am I listening to the voice of God? Am I following Him? And if I am, then I can trust Him to take me to the exact place that He wants me to be, that He wants me to be. It may not be the place I wanted to be, but it's the place He wants me to be. And I think really that's where so many people get it wrong is I need to see the objective. I need to see the
Yeah.
end game. I need to understand how this is going to work out. And that's just not how God works.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've kind of taken more the point of view of that, the game is the journey, right? So if
That's
like
right.
if
That's
I,
right.
and so
Yep.
when I wake up and I say, did I, was I open to allow the spirit to work through me today,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
got to have that experience and share in the upliftment that was part of that, then today was a
Yeah.
good day. And if I have that every day, then that'll be a great life, right? It's like
Yeah,
I always
that's
say,
right.
you know, the way to lead an inspired life is to only act on inspired thoughts.
That's good.
You
That's
know,
good.
you know,
Yeah, that's good.
but but I found that it's a challenge because in the respect that um, I grew up in a world where um, I'll say time was considered to be more than it should be, in the respect that not enough focus on the now and too much focus on
Mm,
past and future,
yeah,
and it's and so people talk about, well, I'm excited that I'm going to be going here, and I'm excited about that, and I'm hurt about this, and I'm upset about
yeah,
that, and it's like, well, yeah, but all those things are part of time, but none of those are like right now.
yeah.
And so I want part of my challenge and what I like to share with people is that um, being present is really helpful.
Mm,
And that, at least in my mind, the past and the future only exist when I'm thinking about them, and I can only be thinking about them in the present moment. And
mm,
so, I'm trying to train myself to not be overly invested in time and to be more present, because all of the good stuff always happens in the present moment.
right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I think people, certainly we should plan for the future and be wise about the direction that we're going. We learn the lessons of the past. And so both are helpful, but they're only helpful to the extent that we're able to engage in the present. You're right. And a lot of people, I think, move past time now with their family and time now with opportunities that God has given to them and the good things that are happening in their life now because they're looking so far down the road and you never get there, so you're constantly looking down the road, so you never experience joy, you never experience peace, you never experience contentment because you're constantly looking to the next thing. One exercise that I've gone through recently and it's been helpful is and I do it just about every day, is to write down, something that you're thankful for today. And it sounds so simple, and a lot of people do this. For me, it's been like really challenging because I'm so like forward looking that to stop long enough and go, okay, what am I thankful for today? It's been so helpful because I'm able to, engage in the present instead of worrying about the future. And it gives you a sense of God is at work today. It's not just something God's going to do something great. No, God is doing great things right now.
Yeah.
And you need to acknowledge that. And writing that down has been very, very helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that also, all of the inspiration that I've received, I've only received it in the present moment,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because they're really. So it's like, and, but and I think a lot of people, uh, um, oriented towards wanting to connect with people. And one of the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, and I keep trying to correct the ship, is that um, abandoning what I know to be true to adopt to agree with what other people say
Mm.
does not make me more connected to myself and God.
Right. Right.
And that what I need to do is I need to focus on being, connected to that divine spark within me, and who and what I am,
Mm.
and let that be an inspiring example for other people to do the same for them, as opposed
That's
to,
good.
but but it's so there's such a history of being invested in trying to do whatever I could to feel connected to everybody else. It's like,
Right.
I want to agree with you, with
Right. Right.
I remember in my 20s, I used to say, well, I'm the go along to get along kid, you know? It's like, where should we eat? Anywhere you want. What do you want to do?
Right.
Whatever you want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's exercising discernment, I think, right? But not everything is worth fighting over. But man, yeah, you don't just want to drift through life and yeah, you have to be grounded in truth. And I think that's why being grounded in, a biblical worldview is so important because you can see clearly what you're supposed to do and then hang on to that. And surround yourself if you can, ideally with people that agree with you on that. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think I mean, for me, I try to make it as simple because, I've investigated a lot of spiritual things throughout my years and stuff. And um, I would say the one thing that I relate to more than anything else is that when I uplift myself, I uplift everybody else and vice versa.
Hmm.
That anything that I can do to lift somebody up, and a lot of times that's appreciating them, or thanking them, um, or sometimes it's just, telling one of my stories, I mean, it could, whatever I'm inspired to do, but I know what it feels like to lift myself up, and I know what it feels like for others to be lifted up. And so I kind of just am open to whatever comes
Right.
that is part and parcel of that.
Hmm.
And one of my phrases that I love is that every act of kindness stands for all time. I just
Hmm.
love that. I don't know why. I just do, and it's
Yeah.
because I think that, regardless of what religion you're practice and stuff, I mean, we're all part of God, right? So I mean,
Hmm.
it's at least that's my view.
Right.
And that I want to do all I can to lift everybody up, regardless of um, what their beliefs and practices are.
Hmm. Yeah, and I take I would say a distinctly Christian worldview, and so that means something, right? But
Right.
but even as a Christian principle or ethic, um, being kind and loving your neighbor as yourself and doing what you do not for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the world that you live in and the people that you seek to lead. These are I would say Judeo-Christian ethics or principles, and we find these in other places, of course. And it's, to your earlier point, it's when you are authentically who you were created to be, that is when you can do the most good for the people around you. And if you believe, as I do, that God created each one of us uniquely with different gifts and talents and opportunities and all of those things, then you're only living the life that you were created to live when you're allowing those to express themselves. So I can help my family and I can help other people in my life and society and culture at large when I am using the gifts, talents, opportunities, resources, personality, when I'm using those things for the benefit of others. And I think you're right. The way that we help other people is by being, I don't know if I would use the phrase true to yourself, but I would say true to who God created me to be. When I'm that, then everyone around me benefits because those gifts were given for the benefit of everyone, not just for me. Um, and when I'm just going along to get along or whatever, I'm not helping anyone. I'm certainly not helping myself, but I'm not
Yeah.
using what I was given for the benefit of others. Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so empowering to do that, right? To be able, I mean, like one of the things that I feel I was born to do was to bring people together, right? And
Mm,
and to bridge differences,
yeah.
and I just because and the reason I say that in many respects is I get all kinds of inspiration about how to do that,
Mm,
and
right, right.
and when I do it, it's like, wow, man, I'm
Yeah,
energized, I'm uplifted, I'm inspired, and it's like, and so it's like, yeah, well, who wouldn't want to live that life,
right. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
And
right.
so one of the reasons I do this podcast is to, expose the listeners to all kinds of different perspectives and stuff, and
Mm,
where they can see that, uh, we got a whole lot more in common than we have different, but we each have our
sure.
unique talents to use, and if we can be examples of using those talents and inspires you to identify, accept, and use your talents, then we've done well.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right.
So, but yeah, I think that one of my things is that I mean, I believe that uh, we're all one, and that we're all, at least my belief is, and I'm fine, right? I mean, other people have different beliefs, and
Sure.
that's fine.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to, I'm not saying you're wrong, right? It's like, but what's right for you is right for you. What's right for me is right for me,
Mm,
and my belief is that is that that divine spark is the essence of who we all are,
mm,
and that we've um, our purpose is to take our unique path to accepting and expressing and benefiting ourselves and others by taking ownership of that divine spark
mm.
and and sharing it in the most uplifting ways we can figure
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. Well, and and I guess just mentioned this, but yeah, I think you call it a divine spark. I would say that, the presence of God in our lives
Yeah,
is that's the pursuit. And if we are living out what we were called or created to be, you said you believe one of your purposes on earth is to connect others. Well, then you're most fulfilled when you're doing that because that's what God put in you. And I think that's where so many of us miss it. We're running after things that are outside of our created purpose. We're outside of our, talents, gifts, and opportunities because we look at someone else and we say, I'd rather do that or what. But that's not who you are. That's who they are.
right,
And you're most
right.
fulfilled when you're pursuing what you were uniquely put on this planet to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I think that, and I think that people are looking for, many people are looking for help and support in doing that and
Mm,
identifying that, right? I mean, there's uh, my the first 7 years I was out of college, I had the sales job that I told you about, but my whole thought during that time was, uh, I need to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life, and
mm,
it took me 7 years to get even an inkling of like what I was supposed to do, and
right.
it's gotten refined over time. But I told myself that that was an important question to answer, and however long
Mm,
it took me to be able to hear the answer to that question was how
yeah.
long I was going to take. But I was going to stick with it until I figured out what it was I was supposed to do in my life.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't I knew it wasn't working in corporate America, you know,
Yeah.
doing the job that I had, that was a place for me to park while I figured out the answer to my question.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
So
Yeah. That's
so
an
so I
important answer. Yeah.
I ask you, it's like, okay, so when people come to you and they say, okay, I'm not in the military anymore, can you help me find my path? How do you approach it?
Yeah. Well, again, approaching it from, you know, kind of that Christian perspective, right? That
Right.
Christian worldview. It's it's first of all helping someone to understand, and this is a process I had to go through. So, I messed this up for a long time, but it's helping people understand that who you are is not a job that you did.
Right.
And I think so many of us, regardless of our backgrounds or what we believe, we struggle with that because we find so much value in a job. We find so much value in a relationship. We find so much value in these external things that may be good. They may have value. There's something you can be proud of, but they don't make you who you uniquely are. They don't make you, uh, Scott or Jeremy. They don't make you that person. It's just a job that you did. in the military and in the first responder world, there's so much emphasis put on your job. I mean, to the point that you go in the military, you go to basic training. What's the point of basic training? It's to take away your pre-basic training identity and to give you a new identity, and
Wow.
then give you a uniform and a rank that speaks to that identity, and put you in an organization that has a structure and a process that continues to feed into that identity. And so you take as your identity that job
Wow.
that you did, and when you separate from that, it can be after 4 years, 20 years, whatever. When you separate from that, if your identity was wrapped up in that thing, you no longer know who you are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so many of the men and women leaving the military, they're dealing perhaps with trauma, but the bigger issue is not trauma, it's identity. It's a loss of identity. I don't know who I
Okay.
am.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the problem with that is if I don't know who I am, then I don't know why I'm here. So if
Right.
you don't have identity nailed down, you don't have purpose nailed down.
Right.
And if you don't have a reason to be here, then I mean, fundamentally, by definition, don't have hope. And
Uh,
if you don't have hope, then, it's crazy. But the next logical decision is to say, well, there's no reason for me to be here. And a lot of people choose self-harm and make those decisions that are permanent decisions. But it goes back to a lack of identity. And so when we're having these conversations, it starts with you need to find your identity in someone that is immutable, doesn't change. Jobs will change, situations, circumstances, relationships, all of it will change. And so when you find your identity in a relationship with God, God doesn't change. The Bible says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. The world will change, everything will change. He does not change. And so my identity found in him, who he created me to be, what he created me to accomplish. That biblical worldview, that's going to the Bible and understanding that doesn't change. And so my identity is firm, which gives me a purpose and hope, and I'm able to walk that out in spite of what's happened to me. And so, it sounds simple. It's difficult, but
well, no,
it is simple. It's understanding I'm not the sum total of a job that I did or people that I was around or something good or bad that happened to me. My identity is in who I was created to be, and that
exactly.
then gives me the
Exactly.
opportunity to walk
And
that
then,
out.
and then the follow-up question is that God created me uniquely to be me. What is that?
Yes.
What, in terms that I can relate to and align with. What does that mean? Do I do this job? Do I do that job?
Right.
Do I do this type of life? Do I pursue that type of life?
Hmm.
How does one, how do you help somebody communicate with God to be able to receive the understanding
Yep.
from God of what their unique path and journey is to be,
Yep.
to the point where it's specific enough that they can like carry it out.
Yeah. So there are a few things. I think one is, spending time reading the Bible. The Bible is called truth, right? It's truth. It guides us into truth.
Right.
It's spending time in prayer. You talked about prayer and meditation. It's asking God to work.
Okay.
Again, the Bible, James chapter 1:5 says, if you don't have wisdom, ask God and he'll give it to you.
Okay.
So it's spending time reading what he said to us, and then it's spending time asking him to speak to us and trusting that he will.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the starting point.
Okay.
And then I think you ask basic questions. Questions like, what would I love to spend my life doing, even if I couldn't get paid for it? What do I, what am I passionate about? Even if I couldn't get paid for it, what would I like to do? Okay, well, that starts to reveal something unique about you.
Okay.
You ask questions like, what do I have a unique, if even undeveloped talent for? What are some things I have a gifting for that other people don't? And maybe this means you go to people that know you and say, hey, what makes me unique? What makes me, different? What are some things that I do that other people don't do? And you start to run down thing, and we can think in very specific terms, like you're good at building or drawing or writing or whatever, but
Yeah.
it may be you're very relational, you're very good at connecting people, you're good at listening to people, you're good at, whatever. And so you go, okay, what would I not mind doing for the rest of my life, even if I couldn't get paid for it? What do I have a unique talent or ability for, even if it's not been developed, but just something that's unique to me? And then looking back over the history of my life, where have I found meaning and purpose? What has, we could say it this way, filled my bucket and not
Yeah.
emptied my bucket,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Where are those moments that I've thought, man, this energizes me. This is exciting. And as we do that, so we are in the Word, trying to understand what God has for us. We're asking Him to direct us, and then we're asking those questions. Maybe we're enlisting other people who know us well and can help us go, look, you're good at this. I've seen you do that. Have you thought about this? And then starting to walk that out. And I think all of that couched with this reality, you're not going to mess it up. So start walking, start working, start going after that, and just trust that the path in front of you will have twists and turns and ups and downs, but you just keep moving forward and you're going to get there.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that that's probably, I mean, I would hazard a guess that you have an extremely high success rate doing that with people because that,
Yeah, and it's because people are searching, right? And they're searching for what you just mentioned, purpose. What is this about? Who am I? And so as you walk people through that, I believe, fundamentally to my core, God is not trying to hide that from us. The
no,
fact that we struggle with it so much is not God's fault. And so for most of us, we just need to stop long enough to walk through that and get around people that can help us, to be in a quiet place that doesn't have the craziness of the world so that we can actually figure that out. Who am I? Um, and I believe that as we seek God, He's going to help us understand that.
no, I think that's awesome. And one of the things that I appreciate about that is that that methodology exists all over the place. It exists in religions, outside of religions,
Sure.
in all religions, and it's like, and people have used that effectively in all kind of different circumstances. And I think that that's just, it's one of the things that, if something is true, it's sort of true everywhere,
Right. Right.
and it's like, and I just think that it's so wonderful, at least my point of view, because like I'm oriented to bring people together, right? Is to say, look,
Yeah.
you know what, and for those people that don't subscribe to religion, do exactly what Jeremy just said, right?
Mm.
And you can just call it your higher self if you don't want to call it God, but the experience of listening, asking, meditating, being uplifting, being energized, helping other people, being kind, that's part of everything, and
Right.
it's like, and don't um, create problems that don't need to be there by
Mm.
saying, I want to label it this and you want to label it that, but
Sure.
but we're talking about the same thing.
Right.
So let's
Well,
not
and
let's
you said this, truth is truth. We're not talking about relative truth. Like people like to say, well, what's your truth? Well, there is truth. There are principles that are true,
right.
regardless of where you find yourself in the world. And that's what we're talking about is, what are those principles and what is that truth?
Yeah, and I just um it's I was looking forward to talking to you because I'm very much about uh, you know the commonality
Mm,
that we all share, as well as the uniqueness, both, right? I mean, you
sure.
need both, right? And so and it's been um, exciting for me to talk to you and see the wisdom and clarity expressed through a Christian perspective.
Mm, yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. And these are important conversations to have. And, it's interesting. We have a program that again, has that Christian worldview. But most of the people who attend our program aren't Christians. They don't start off saying, well, I'm looking for a Christian program. Most of them are just looking for hope and for help. And so, yeah, wherever someone finds themselves, who's listening and trying to understand, start where you are and start moving forward. And I really believe that God will guide those steps.
Yeah, and also I think that there's there are people that relate powerfully to the Christian point of view, and that's where they need to be, right? You need to go where you relate to it and it helps you,
Mhm.
right? And if you're Jewish and you relate to a Jewish point
Sure.
of view, then you go there. Or if you're Muslim and you relate to that, but the being kind to people, uplifting people,
Right.
that
Right.
that should pervade
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah. These are universal, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
And it's and boy, I'm telling you, I was very afraid that I would get drafted uh,
Mm.
because the year that I turned 18 was the year they did away with the draft. So coming up to that, I registered. I was 1A,
Yeah.
and I from what you said about basic training, um, I, I would not have done well there.
Hmm.
I uh, I've always been somebody that I'll respect and value authority when they earn it.
Right. Well, in that environment, yeah,
I would not.
you,
There were two things that really worried me. One is that um, I can't keep my mouth shut when I see a better way of doing something,
right.
and the other is that that was one, and I don't know what the other one was, but oh, the other is I was worried. I said I don't know what would happen if they told me I had to kill somebody. I said I don't know
Mm.
if
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I don't know if I don't know if I could do that,
Right.
And
Right.
those were the two big concerns. And so
Yeah.
I was really happy when they ended the draft because I didn't have to do with those two issues of
Right.
somebody telling
Right.
me, not to be who I am and to kill another human being.
Mm.
Boy, you guys are asking a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, but I have, some degree of empathy for people that were in the military, and I really appreciated what you had to say about basic training. That would
Mm.
really open my eyes in a big way to some things, and so I appreciate that. And I just want to tell you that if that story impacted me, it probably will impact other people too.
Well,
So
good. Yeah. Good.
anyway, this has been great, and God bless you for, the work that you're doing, and I have to say, so many people that struggle and stuff don't run into people with your clarity and guidance to
Mm.
help them find their path,
Sure.
right? Because that's what's really going to heal, right? I mean, is like
Yeah.
is doing your path, and
Mm.
God bless you for um, the work that you do and the way that you do it, and it's so needed in the world.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Scott. Yeah. Thank you.
So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
Easiest way is through our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, mightyoaksprograms.org. Tons of resources, opportunities to contact us, whatever. It's all there. So mightyoaksprograms.org.
And I can tell you from a detached point of view, um, what this gentleman has to offer is not available everywhere. And I would
Mm.
really encourage you, if you have the slightest inclination at all, reach out to them. And I have every faith that they'll help you in every way they possibly can. So please take advantage of that resource.
It's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll end the recording here. Thank you.